Hello and welcome to this Mirror Facebook Live, all about your money rights if you're going off on your summer holidays. Knowing your refund rights can make the difference between enjoying your holiday and not, and can also help you get your cash back if the worst does happen. I'm Sam Barker, a money reporter here at the Mirror, and I'm hugely grateful to be joined today by consumer champion Martyn James. Hello, Martyn.
Hello, Sam. Hi, everyone.
And as promised, Martyn is wearing his summariest shirt to really kind of get us in that kind of holiday, get us in that holiday spirit. And Martyn, as well as being a fashion icon, he's also a refunds wizard. So we're looking forward to taking you through all of the pitfalls around your money and your holidays and your rights if the worst should strike. But we're also here to answer your questions. So if you have anything you'd like to ask, or you just want to have your view heard, please do feel free to post underneath here, and we will do our best to answer both during the session and towards the end. So one thing's for sure, despite the cost of living crisis, British homes are really splashing the cash on holidays this year. We're actually expected to spend more than £50 billion this year. That's 9% more than pre-pandemic in 2019. More than 2/3 of that money is going on overseas travel. This year has also been the most disruptive to overseas holidays since the start of the pandemic. You'll all have seen the stories of flight cancellations. You've seen the pictures of mountains of lost luggage, lack of staff at airports, and of course, the ever-present risk of COVID getting in the way. So it's fair to say, there are numerous pitfalls when it comes to enjoying your getaway this year. And probably the main one, certainly one of the ones that we get the most kind of questions and kind of comments and interest on the Mirror website about is flight cancellations. So Martyn, if you are maybe your flight has recently been cancelled, or you've got a trip booked, and later down the line you get the bad news that your flight has been cancelled or grounded, what are your rights in that situation, please?
Well, Sam, this is by far the question that I get asked the most by people, not just people who've already found themselves in this situation, but people who are going away. I don't have a single friend or family member who's not asked me about this nervously as they wait to find out. I should say as well, with loads of this advice, we've got tons and tons of Mirror columns that we'll be sharing or giving information out about later. So don't worry about getting everything down. Quite a lot of this can get a little bit technical, but let's just focus on the most important bits. The good news is, if it is good news, is that if your flight is cancelled, or if your flight's delayed for longer than 3 hours, chances are you'll be entitled to compensation. Now, that compensation might be, a little bit disappointing given the fact that what you really want to do is go away on a holiday, but it is really, really useful to know about. This is an EU law that's transferred into UK law after Brexit. So I'm pleased to say, apart from the fact that you now get your compensation in pounds, not euros, nothing else has changed there. Now, if your flight's delayed for longer than 3 hours and takes off from the UK or European Union or the airlines based here, then you should usually qualify for compensation. The 3 hours basically ends from the moment they open the door at your destination, if you really, really want to keep a close eye on these things. And there are different levels of compensation depending on whether you're flying short, medium, or long haul. And the same also goes for cancelled flights. Now, this is the big one. With cancelled flights, if your flight is cancelled 14 days or over that 14 days, within that period running up to your actual booking, so from 1 to 14 days, or actually even if you're stood there at the airport, then you are entitled to that same compensation, though actually it gets a little bit more better in certain areas as well. It's divided up into more categories, but the point is you do get some money. But the airline also has an obligation to get you on the next available flight, and that can be either through them or something they often don't like to talk about, but it is in the law, through a competitor. So if you're stuck at the airport in this nightmare scenario and you're not getting anything from the airline, go online, maybe do a few checks beforehand, see if there's a competitor actually flying from the same airline, and you might be able to get on that flight. And the compensation starts from when that replacement flight touches down. So in virtually all sets of circumstances, you're going to get the full compensation as well. You're entitled to actually just get a refund if you just kind of want to call it quits and walk away. But I would encourage people to at least, try and get an alternative flight, because that's where the money is. There's also compensation if you're stuck at the airport after a certain period of time. You might get some vouchers. They're pretty rubbish, but it's better than nothing, the food and drink for the families. And if your flight's cancelled and you're delayed overnight, the airline should be putting you up in a hotel and getting you there and back from the hotel. They also cover things like emergency calls as well. Now, I know for all of the people who are watching this at the moment will be thinking, I just don't want my holiday ruined. And I'm afraid that Sam and I don't have an answer to that. We're hoping that the airlines and the airports will tell you as soon as possible if it looks like your flight is going to be cancelled. But just knowing that these are your rights and they're in place gives you a little bit more reassurance as well, particularly if you're traveling with younger kids. So get hold of the Mirror's column on all of this, and then you know exactly what you're entitled to if things do go wrong.
Perfect. Thank you, Martyn. And I think when it comes to refunds, that is really invaluable advice. We get asked about this stuff an awful lot. You've heard it there. It's all gospel. And I think this is the kind of information which a lot of airlines, particularly, they don't necessarily direct people towards it. So I think it's really important to kind of have it spelt out and kind of hammered home. Now, just before we get into other aspects of saving money and staying safe on your holidays this summer, I just wanted to take a very quick moment just to answer a very quick question which we've had from Chazza Williamson. Chazza Williamson is actually not to do with holidays. Chazza says, when's the next cost of living payment? Excellent question. It will be in the autumn. Now, I know that's very broad. That's all we know at the moment. That's all the government has said. It will be in the autumn, unless you are on tax credits, in which case your first payment will be in the autumn and your second payment will be in the winter. So yeah, as soon as we know, we'll let you know. But yeah, Martyn, so going back to to people's summer holidays this year, one of the things which I think people fear the most is they arrive at their destination safely and on time, but their luggage hasn't. If that happens to you, what are your rights if your luggage gets lost?
So you've got two areas of rights here, Sam, that really apply. First things first, even though it might be the airline's fault, and you may have seen those pictures of the luggage mountains at Heathrow and at Manchester airports, it's actually the responsibility of the airline, once you've checked your luggage in, to get it where it needs to be. Now, there has been absolute chaos. I'm actually dealing with two cases that go back 2 months at the moment over missing cases. They're pretty extreme, but it is worthwhile bearing in mind that obviously this can ruin a holiday as well. If you've got a travel insurance policy, you may find that policy, if it's pretty comprehensive, will provide you with some money so that you can make emergency purchases. But the airline will also look at doing things like that as well. So first stop, speak to the airline if possible to find out about what's happened to your luggage and if they're offering anything to help you. Secondly, speak to your travel insurance policy holder and ask them about what they've got available, if they can advance you some money, or if you're allowed to spend up to a certain amount, just to make sure you've got clothes and the other things that are necessary. This is one of these times where I also give advice that always makes me feel a little bit wary, but it's worthwhile saying. I always take a credit card on holiday with me. I don't spend on it the rest of the time, but it's there just in case I do find myself hit with a double booked hotel, for example, or a problem with something going on in that country, or my luggage gets lost. That way you can at least buy things, keep receipts, and then try and go back and get your cash back at a later stage. Airlines are also responsible for damaged luggage as well, and that can include replacing the luggage within reason. If you're carting around Louis Vuitton bags, which I don't think anyone I know will be, but if you've got super expensive luggage, don't expect that to get fully compensated for. But in the main, most of the suitcases that you have, you'll get a suitable replacement brand new.
Perfect. There we go. And I think again, it's really worth kind of hammering these kind of points home. Because I think a lot of people, they don't really realise what their rights are in that situation, and when you're in a different country, it's really not the time to be learning about this stuff for the first time. Now, you mentioned travel insurance there. I think travel insurance is something that is very easy to forget about. Obviously, for most holidays, it's not a legal requirement to get it. These policies can vary a lot and they can be quite complicated. And I think when people are shelling out an awful lot of money on a holiday, sometimes they can look at travel insurance and go, oh, well, it's just an additional cost at quite an expensive time. But, Martyn, how important are these policies and how do we know what's the right policy to get?
Oh, do you know, Sam, it's absolutely incredibly important to get travel insurance. Just think about the strike actions that might be happening, say, with BA or things along those lines. With many airlines, you will get compensation for that, but not always. If it's an air traffic control strike, that's not covered by flight compensation law. Neither is airport strikes as well. Neither are, right? Sorry. So this is where a travel insurance policy comes into its own. If you've not got one and you've booked a holiday, have a look after this. Have a look online. Look at the comparison tables. There's some really, really good ones out there, and get a policy that starts now. That will protect you for something known as curtailment. If you're not able to actually travel for various reasons, be it sickness, illness, a family incident, you'll have additional levels of protection there as well. But it really, really, really is important. Now, I have a bugbear with travel insurance because my last policy was a whopping 170 pages long. Now, it's not realistic to look at that. That's because loads of things can go wrong on a holiday. Insurance policies will give you a key facts document that should explain all of the things that you need to know before you travel. But it is worthwhile bearing in mind, that actually those documents, those full documents, that was actually longer than my beach book, I was horrified to say. And I only read one thing, and it wasn't the T&Cs. Now, when it comes to travel insurance, just to fly through a couple of quick things that you really need to look for. First things first, have a look at the limits that you've got on the policies. These will be the excess limits. That's the amount of money that you have to pay towards a claim. The cheaper the policy, the higher those excess limits will be. So it can be a false economy. You could save 10 quid on buying a cheaper insurance policy, but have a £300 difference on an excess fee, which is what you'd lose from a claim. So I tend to get the best one that you can afford. Next up, have a look at the limitations, the maximum amount of money that the policy will pay out. Now, if you're going to somewhere like America, and I cannot make this any more clear, America has some of the most expensive healthcare in the world. A friend of mine was charged $55 for an extra pillow that she didn't even ask for after she was hit by a car in America. You cannot go to countries like that without insurance. Most policies will cover you for up to, say, £1 million worth of medical treatment, which sounds like a lot, but you'll be so grateful once it's there. For America, you need to be looking at around about £2 million worth of cover on that as well. So it really is important to look at those limits. The other thing I'd say is have a think about lost possessions and money and the things that you're carrying around with you. We've all got expensive phones and tablet computers. The kids might have gaming machines. Just take the tech that you need, because most policies have limitations on, the expensive goods that you carry around, and leave the jewelry at home. It's never a good idea to take that out with you. And one last thing, have a look at things like the cover that you get for actually being brought back home if something goes wrong. This is known as repatriation. All of these terms are like really ancient and very hard to understand, but repatriation is really important because if you break your leg on holiday, then you might find yourself waiting around to actually get back to the United Kingdom, and that you have to be put on, there has to be space to fit you on the plane and things along those lines. So always have a look just to see what would happen if something went wrong.
That's great advice. And I think just to sort of tag on to that, if we're talking about, the risk of getting ill in the European Union, it is well worth making sure that you've got an up-to-date, what we used to be called the EHIC, the European Health Insurance Card. It's now called the GHIC after Brexit. I'm not quite sure what the G stands for, but basically it's exactly the same thing. These are free cards, which if you take them with you on holiday and you get injured or you get ill and you need to go to hospital, they will let you use the state hospitals and doctors in the country that you're in for the same price as a resident of that country would pay. So that can range from, it can be range from free upwards. But the point is that you would not be charged overwhelmingly large medical bills for getting ill. Now they are free. They are government-backed cards, and you can apply for them. You can Google these things, apply for them on the government website. It's worth saying that if you haven't got one, it can take several weeks for your application to actually be processed and you to receive the card. It is very, very well worth getting the application in now if you've got a trip booked in a few weeks' time, because should the worst happen, they could save you an awful lot of money. Now, one thing that's almost for certain this year is that a lot of people, when they're jetting abroad or what have you, they're spending an awful lot more time waiting in airports. And I think airports, they're sort of designed to be, you can spend an awful lot of money in them and you can spend an awful lot of time there, but there is a bit of a limit. So Martyn, what are your tips if you find yourself stuck in an airport for a kind of prolonged period of time or more than you might expect? How can you manage that?
Do you know, I was inspired to write my most recent column after chatting with you, Sam, about this very factor and having spent some exceptionally long and boring hours stuck in various airports, largely for work, I have to say. So in this day and age, it makes sense to actually prepare for the worst. And then if you breeze through security and everything's a dream, then that's absolutely amazing. If you're traveling with kids, obviously the most important thing is to keep them occupied, but you don't want to get weighed down with extra baggage charges as well. So take things that are disposable, colouring books or things along those lines. So if you keep them occupied, but if you have to leave them behind or gift them to another family, then it's certainly something that will take away a little bit of that frustration of keeping the kids occupied in a very busy airport. But the most important thing you can do is to buy a good mobile phone external battery charger and have the right cables with you as well, and some emergency backup cables. I always take 2 or 3 of these big chargers. There's loads available online, starting at about £5, going up to 20 quid for a really decent one. They will be invaluable because your airline ticket is in all likelihood going to be on your phone. The way that you'll be notified if there are problems with your flight will be through the company's app or via email as well. So even if things aren't coming up on the boards, you might find that you miss important information if your battery is running low. So don't take any chances. Make sure you've got a battery charger. There are usually charging ports, I've noticed, at airports, but with very long queues after them. So that's something else to watch out for as well. And again, we always talk about the airport charge. Sad but true, you will pay a premium for anything you buy at an airport. So get savvy, get the things that you need beforehand, and just grit your teeth and prepare yourself for an expensive bottle of water on the other side. And one last thing, if you're getting on a plane, because a lot of staffing issues still aren't sorted out, you may find that the very, very lovely trolley service, which I know I look forward to, might not be arriving. So that could be drinks, booze, and of course food. So make sure you pop to a sandwich shop, just get a cheap sandwiches for the family and some drinks. And that way, if the trolley service doesn't occur, you don't have to deal with, hungry, angry times waiting for the flight to land.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Martyn. Now, just turning very quickly to some of the questions we've been getting. So again, this isn't a kind of a travel-related question, but I think it's a very valid question anyway. But a question here from Jane Keeley. I hope I'm pronouncing your surname correctly, Jane. She says, I'm still waiting for the first cost of living payment. Can I get through to the DWP? So Jane, at the moment, do nothing, because they've still got 2 more days to make these payments to you. If you haven't had that payment by Monday, so the 1st of August, the government advice is to contact the office which pays your benefits and ask what's going on. There will be a small number of people, they've already said that they don't make the payments in July. They're aiming to pay almost everybody in July, the first half of the £650 cost of living payment. If you don't get that money, try contacting the office that pays your benefits. If that doesn't work, then email me, sam.barker@mirror.co.uk, sam.barker@mirror.co.uk, and I will look into it and we will get it sped along. What we are expecting to see from Monday is a lot of people who are expected to have had this money haven't had it. So when that happens, we will do our level best to look into that for you and get that money to you. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, this is there's a Q&A aspect to this call as well. We're on hand to answer any and all of your travel questions. Martyn has already very bravely said that he is he's prepared for any and every question. So fire them away, and we'll definitely answer. So Martyn, one thing which I know came as a complete surprise to me is that some airports have sort of hidden fees associated with them, which I think a lot of British travellers won't be familiar with, and often only find out about this when it's too late and they're being asked to pay some money. So can you talk us through what are some of the charges which you've seen? What should we be aware of?
I certainly can. There's nothing worse than, just before you go away on holiday, being hit with a load of additional charges that are just going to annoy you. But if you've not been to an airport for a while, you're going to find that actually a lot of the things that used to be free are now no longer free. And many other things have actually crept up in value. Now, the one that really, really annoys me is the drop-off fee. Most airlines are now charging anywhere between £3 and £8.50 simply to drop someone off. That's barely even stopping. That's just dropping outside the airport. So factor that in too. Short stay car park charges have also increased significantly across all of the major airlines as well. And needless to say, kind of long stay car park charges have also increased. So have a think about how you're getting to the airport and what you're doing when you arrive. If you arrive by taxi, you'll usually skirt that drop-off fee, which is one kind of advantage, though, of course, it's not the cheapest way of getting to where you need to be. The same goes for train ticket prices as well. You know, a lot of the train ticket prices have increased. But once you actually get to the airport, I'm sorry to say, there are actually two airports that are charging people for the plastic bags that you need to put your toiletries into. Now, it may well only be £1 or £1.50 for 2 bags, but that's completely unfair and unnecessary. If it's something that you actually have to do to go through security, you can take your own bags. You can pop to any kind of pharmacy and they'll have loads of kind of see-through bags. But at the end of the day, if you've got a see-through bag at home and it meets the criteria set down in the security procedures on the airport's website, you should be able to coast through. You'll also find that lots of things that allow people to queue jump are now monetized, which I think is cheating. So there's actually fast track security, which you have to pay for in advance if you don't want to kind of face being in a massive queue with security. I've not seen it make much of a difference, to be honest. And being an old Northern left-winger, I disapprove of anything that allows people to pay to jump the queue. But nevertheless, you know, if you're desperate or you're really, really worried about it, it is an option in most airlines. So keep an eye out, have a look online, but see what you'd be paying for if you're driving, leaving your car, or anything else that you need whilst getting your family scooted through those queues.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Martyn. And I think, you know, to me, all these charges, they're just sort of a tax, an additional tax on kind of going on a holiday. So I think a lot of people, you know, they're annoying, but it's better to know about them in advance and know what you're getting into and be able to get around them if you possibly can. Just again, turning very quickly to comments. We've got a comment here from Anne Jackson. Anne, I think I remember you from previous Facebook Lives. If not, it was someone else with the same name. Hello again. You said the very best thing you could do is stay in England. That's my advice to people who are generally struggling to pay their bills. I think, you know, there are an awful lot of people who are thinking along the same lines. So, you know, the kind of recent estimates about how much we're going to be spending on holiday this year, about 15, almost 16 billion pounds will be spent on UK people staying in this country, what people call staycations, although I particularly don't like that expression. So the rest of it, which is about, you know, just over 38 billion, will be on overseas trips. But it does look like the direction of travel is that more and more British people are having holidays within the UK. I think partly because they think it's a cheaper option. On the other hand, what we are also seeing is that the cost of going on holiday in this country is going up. Obviously, you know, part of that's petrol, but part of it's also you know, Airbnbs and kind of people having to put their own costs up. So it's still, unfortunately, you can do it on the cheap. It's not always as cheap as it was, but I think, you know, what you're saying is kind of very relevant. I think there are a lot of people who are kind of feel the same way. And so, you know, Martyn, one thing, you know, another thing which we should really talk about, you know, you've mentioned, yeah, it's very important to take a credit card with you if you've got access to one and you're kind of approved for one when you travel overseas. If you're traveling outside the UK and you need local currency, you know, obviously you're facing the prospect, depending on where you go, of paying kind of high exchange fees. You know, what are the best ways of getting a good deal on your travel money?
Well, the days of kind of going away with kind of like a bulging secret pocket filled with foreign currency are kind of over, actually. You'll find that many of the old currency houses that you used to see kind of dotted around your town centre have all closed down over the lockdown. The new breed of them are actually rather fantastic. I've been around a few of them to see how they work. You usually go into a private in a secluded place, so nobody's kind of like peeking at you and watching you wander out with €1,000 before you go on holiday. There are some really, really good comparison rates online as well, so you can see, based on your postcode, which of the currency providers has the best rates for you. And as always the case, you can go in and collect, or you can have that currency delivered. But one thing to factor in is there's a whole new range of digital bank accounts that are actually really, really good and worthwhile considering, maybe only even if you want to use them for going on holiday. I know I did that recently when I went away. The reason why this matters is because if you pay for something on your debit card and it's with one of the more traditional banks or the high street ones, then you will pay a range of charges. There's a transaction fee, a currency conversion fee. The other bank might charge a fee as well in Spain or Italy or wherever it is that you are. So it's really a very, very poor way to spend money, and never mind taking money out of the cash machine. However, if you have a look at some of the digital banks and their offers, they offer cards that will guarantee the best rate that's available. It's usually the MasterCard or Amex rate. So they will match that rate, and there are no fees for using your card. So if you're worried about carrying around a large amount of money, you can apply for them now, and it's a very, very good way to do it. You just load up your card. There are also currency cards that you buy from currency places that operate in a very, very similar way, and they're not always accepted absolutely everywhere. The best thing to do is to take a mix, to say maybe have half of the local currency and then your cards to fall back on. But as I said, don't use your standard debit cards, you'll pay a fortune. And one last thing, there are certain credit cards that are obviously a lot more advantageous when it comes to using currency as well. These are called currency credit cards. And again, you can find them, but there is an application process. And if you're not particularly good at keeping on top of kind of the previous credit card bills, you might find you don't qualify. I'm self-employed, so I was turned down for one. I was very disappointed. So you're not necessarily going to get them. So they're not as great as, last minute emergency. Have a look at the digital ones. They're at least free.
Perfect. Fantastic advice. Thank you very much, Martyn. And I mean, one thing, and it's, it's sort of an unfortunate part of going on holiday, but as I keep saying, it's far better to be aware of this going into it. And that's fraud. So fraudsters, unfortunately, are an unwelcome and a growing part of going on holiday. What is the latest word on some of the scams which you're seeing and how we can stay safe from them?
Well, as you know, Sam, I hate scammers. I really do. They drive me mad. I begrudgingly admit that I admire some of the ingenuity in the way that they launch whole new scams, but really, I'd like to see them stamped out once and for all. The biggest one scam that we see comes to when you hire holiday apartments. So even if you go to a legitimate booking site, you can sometimes find that scammers are lurking there. The big clue is if you're asked to pay the person who's offering the apartment off-site. So in other words, you might find some companies will say, only pay through our website, only use PayPal, only use this way of paying. And then the owner of the apartment says, actually, do you know what? Because of the fees I get charged by booking.com, I'll knock you 25% off if you just transfer the money over to me. Now, first of all, the second you use a bank transfer, you lose many, many statutory rights when it comes to paying. You should only pay by credit, debit card, or by an e-payment system like PayPal, where there's a dispute resolution service if something goes wrong. But I've seen some really, really horrible cases where people have turned up on the holiday and the apartment doesn't exist. Or the apartment does exist, but somebody lives in it and it's simply people have nicked pictures off the website. Now, there are lots of things that go around like this. It is few and far between, but you've got to be super, super cautious if you are booking, particularly if you're using sites like Airbnb, where I have to say I've heard numerous horror stories about various Airbnb hosts as well. Also, watch out for scammers at the airport. There's an old classic where you get approached by like gaggles of school children or teenagers with clipboards asking you to sign petitions and everything else. This is data farming. So don't fall for it. You wouldn't fall for it in the UK. Don't let the fact that you're tired and you've just got a plane mean that you accidentally sign something and put your email down. It's a scam. They use those details to try and open credit cards or debit cards, or maybe access your information as well. So be wary when you come out of the airport and don't get befuddled by anyone who's suddenly talking to you very quickly. One last thing, watch out for fake taxi companies as well. All airports have taxi ranks. They're officially accredited, and the taxis in there should be monitored. If somebody approaches you and says they've got a taxi, don't get in it.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Martyn. And hopefully some of the things which we've run through in the last sort of 30 minutes will help you stay safe on holidays. Know some of the things to look out for. Be aware of some of the common money pitfalls and help you get that money back quickly should things go wrong. But I think that's probably is almost everything that we've got time for today. I hope you found that helpful. Thanks to everybody who's tuned in and commented today. If you've got a question that we haven't gotten around to, perhaps you can email it to us. My email is sam.barker@mirror.co.uk. Thank you also to Martyn James for giving us some of your time today. Thank you, Martyn. So that's it from us, and we'll be holding another Facebook Live next Thursday at 1 p.m. on another aspect of the cost of living. Thank you.
Thank you.